here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the musician, songwriter and author Gary Lachman, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all the other groovy stuff. Has just written a book titled Touched by the Presence, which is a story from Blondie to magic and the occult. This is a book that's just come out, available from all good bookshops and also online. During his Blondie period, he went as Gary Valentine and wrote the song I'm Always Touched by Your Presence, Dear, and various other tunes. Anyway, you can find out more about that and lots of other stuff. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. Gary, it's over to you.
Well, it depends. I mean, I grew up pre-Beatles, so, all the girl groups, the Do Run Run, and like Coasters and things like that. But then, the Beatles, the British Invasion, I guess that was, that changed everything in the sense that suddenly, all the stuff coming over from the UK. So you had those, the Zombies, the Kinks, all that kind of stuff, and then
right, you were,
and then
right
then there was like the return. Okay, then the response. So you had Motown anyway, and then you had the San Francisco Sound, and then bands like the Lovin' Spoonful and other. So there was, one of the things, the reason I became a musician, insofar as I was one, and during the time I was working as one, is because I just absorbed all of that 2-minute, 3-minute, songs. And it just seemed a time when there wasn't a bad song on the radio. And I used to hear it on AM radio back in the day before FM. So, I'm kind of prehistoric, but I guess in the sense of personally changing my life, I guess seeing the New York Dolls
right.
in 1973, because I thought, God, I don't mean this to in any way diminish them. It's like, I could do that. They're playing 3 chords. Whereas, it was the prog rock and these operatic sorts of groups that were very big in the early to mid 70s.
Yes.
King Crimson, Yes, and all of that sort of thing. And so that was a response to that. But funnily enough, something that I don't know if this gets noted in histories of rock, but it's something that I noticed was that even before sort of the 3-chord rock that we associate with punk or the New York scene or the Dolls or around the same time or just on the cusp of that, there were these mainstream figures from the 50s who were having comebacks. And you even had contemporary groups. There was a group called Sha Na Na.
Oh yes, they played at Woodstock.
Who did all the doo-wop stuff? I saw them in Madison Square Garden when John Lennon did his concert for Willowbrook, which was a youth mental institution in Staten Island, New York. This was when rock stars started getting into doing these, social. Social work. Just after Harrison's concert for Bangladesh, Lennon did this thing, and Sha Na Na were one of the groups on the menu, as it were. And then Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, and other figures from the 50s, the early days, the primordial days of rock, were having a comeback. So there was a response to this very, in a way, cerebral music for musicians stuff that you have in the prog rock. And then I think one result of that was what happened with bands like the New York Dolls, who played pretty straightforward 3-chord, like old Rolling Stones, and then specifically say they were New York, but then the glam thing kind of died, and then it was the complete opposite in one sense with bands like Television and Patti Smith, because they were all kind of black and white,
yes,
and kind of trying to combine French symbolist poetry, Go Rimbaud, with 3 chords as well, and Verlaine's really strange, jazzed out Coltrane kind of, guitar playing. So when I walked into that world, it was kind of like these people were doing it. They weren't sort of officially rock stars yet, you know what I mean? But they
absolutely.
Up and coming, and it was kind of inspiring to say, well, gee, and I wasn't a musician. I hung out with the musicians in my hometown in New Jersey. Clem Burke, the Blondie drummer, passed away last year. He was one of these local rock heroes in high school when I was growing up. And I used to see him play in bands that did covers of the Allman Brothers and Santana, Grateful Dead, and all that kind of stuff. But he was always hip to what was the next thing coming up. So he was aware of Bowie and Mott the Hoople and Roxy Music and things of that sort that were brewing.
But going back slightly, because you would have been at that age, 15, 16, when the 60s came to an end and 70s. How did it feel to you? Because you obviously, at the time, you haven't got the sort of ability to look back on stuff because you're in the moment. But, suddenly seeing the Beatles break up and then the death of Morrison, Joplin, Hendrix, Brian Jones had died, and it felt like the 60s had started so well. Well, it started in about 63, 64, and then 67, things going well. You must have been a young teen thinking, this is amazing. How did you think pop music was over? Because there was a great documentary or not?
I was 69. I was Christmas Eve is my birthday, so I'm like at the end of the year. So I was 13 until the very last week of 1969.
Right.
And I was, I was listening to the Beatles, and I was a kid, the British Invasion, but then I had a kind of second phase Beatlemania just before and just after they broke up. And John Lennon's first, I write about it in the book, about hearing John Lennon's first, Plastic Ono Man album with Mother and Well, Well, Well and all that. It was like, my God, it's like some kid like me, neurotic problems at home, listening to that. I was like, yes. But my first book called Turn Off Your Mind, which is about the influence of occult ideas and magical ideas on the pop culture in the 1960s, goes into the 60s imploded at the end. They had this fantastic vision of this transformed world, and it all went south, pear-shaped, with the concert at Altamont and Manson and all that. And again, that was like, okay, that was kind of, okay, where was it? I'm in my late teens then, and it's a melange of, you have the prog rock stuff, you got what I call rock, cult, and roll, so Black Sabbath and early heavy metal. And what happened is, like, the 60s magical influence bifurcated into, you have like the nice stuff, which became kind of the new age, let's say, and then the darker stuff, which became this kind of heavy metal, Aleister Crowley influence on heavy metal bands like later down the line Metallica and things like that. But what was interesting for me, as I said, is I guess I first started listening to things like Bowie and Lou Reed and Iggy, maybe tail end of 73 or something like that. So, or maybe a little up until then. So 17 up into 18, and then it was like a lot of stuff happened in my personal life. I left home. I fell into a dark cloud, fell into an insalubrious crowd. As François Villon did, I found myself among harlots and thieves and things of that sort. And then that life of like living this kind of crash pad life for a while in parts of New Jersey translated into how I wound up playing with Chris and Debbie in the very early Blondie days, because Clem was playing with them. Because we were like in this crowd that hung out, and we were the guys on the edge who were into all the weirder stuff. Everybody else is listening to the Grateful Dead and wearing flannel shirts, and we're painting our eyelids and fingernails, stuff like that. And back then it was like that was a challenge to get from one part of town to get from where we lived to the train to take us over to New York. You had to pass through normal, like hide your ears, Spock. You have to pass through the normal area. And nowadays nobody bats an eye. I don't. Maybe in America now it's different, but over here you can do whatever you want.
Yes, it's interesting because I was probably about a month ago. I did an interview with a woman called, is it Bab Hansen, who's the mother of Beck, bizarrely, and she sort of ran away in the 60s, in the early 60s. About the age of 12, so you think, God. And she had quite a famous father, actually, who was one of these kind of artists. But she got together with Jan Kerouac, who was Jack Kerouac's daughter, and they released a single, and that was bizarrely by Neil, who wrote the song Denise, who was covered by Randy and the Rainbows. So that was quite an amazing little story. So because quite a lot of people I've interviewed have often run away from home at a very early age. So were you quite street smart at this point in life?
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, you had to. I mean, I had to be. I mean, that's. I mean, you know, I was. I mean, there's all this stuff. I mean, there's. I don't know if you know, like, there's the story that's supposed to be behind the writing of
Ex-offender.
the ex-offender and all that. Well, that was about not quite exactly the way Debbie, you know, put it across in the lyrics, but it had to do with me, and I was actually. No, I mean, long, sad, you know, story, tragic story about getting involved, getting someone in trouble, both myself and the other person, and a lot of bad things coming out of that. So, I mean, that was all that sort of thing. You know, in hindsight, you can look back on it and it seems romantic in some kind of, you know, grungy kind of way. But, you know, these are very difficult, you know, real life tragedies going on.
Yes.
But that was the other thing about too, is like, you know, you have all these, like, what was the song Angie, that Rolling Stones song, and he's talking about like Jagger's like no money in our clothes or something. It's like, hey Mick, when was the last time you had no money? And like, we actually are, you know. So again, it was about I mean, the punk thing here, which I never got into, but had a political sense to it. It was about the whole system, as it were. But in the New York thing, it was like you were poor, but that was like part of, you know, living that life, living that. There was still this kind of sense of this bohemian, poetic kind of beatnik life that was part of the rock scene in New York there. So, you know, it wasn't so much. I don't remember complaining to anybody about being broke, other than the club owners who didn't pay you enough. You know, so it wasn't like the system. It was like, you know, screw these guys who don't pay us enough. But not having any money, we really didn't have any money in our pockets, so we could write songs about that.
Well, I think I remember doing an interview with Fast Eddie from Motorhead, and he said that, you know, on occasions they would go up to go to a gig, and there was just the gig had been cancelled, but they didn't know, but they didn't have any money to go back home, so they had to sort of vandalize their vehicle and get somebody to tow them back.
Right,
or there was another indie band who again had to see, you know, I don't know, wait in Glasgow for a week while they bussed to get enough money to get sort of petrol to go back home again, because there was no communication at that point. So as Fast Eddie said, you didn't have a pot to do anything in. So
yes.
It was that kind of sense that there was no sort of there was no, I think there was, I don't know, the 80s for me, being an 80s indie kid, there didn't seem to be any particular future or sort of career, because there didn't seem to be any point. So you went on the social security system with great enthusiasm and thought, well, what's the point? We'll get 40 quid a week and you can just claim your housing benefit and then council tax, and then off you go. It's going to be okay in a romantic sort of way.
Well, you know, I mean, you know, if you can, fine. But I mean, I stopped playing in the early '80s. I mean, the last I was Blondie until '77. I had my own band in L.A. and New York for a few years called the Know, K-N-O-W. And then the last roundup was with 2 North American tours with Iggy Pop.
Yes, I sort of, because I sort of saw that in the book. So with the Blondie, just Blondie coming together, then was that via Clem Burke at that stage?
Getting me, yeah, he was the one who kept everything going. I mean, here's the part of history. Debbie had been, you know, at it for a while. She had a Wind in the Willows, like a kind of hippie band in the late '60s. She was around in different incarnations in New York scene in the early '70s, and then she had put an ad in the Village Voice, which used to be the, you know, New York underground paper, looking for a power drummer. And Clem, as I said, he was in several bands. He was trying to break into the, you know, the real world, and he answered the ad, and he had enthusiasm. He was 10 years younger than Debbie. I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 than Chris, and so he, you know. He had the vitality and the drive.
Had you already started?
I was going to say the one thing about Clement. I said I knew him. I met him when I was 15 or something. So, but he that was his aim, was to become a pop star or a great, you know, pop musician, and he did it. So I mean, I have to hand it to him that he had a single-minded, and rightly so, because he's a great drummer. But that, you know, he was the one who kept it going. And then, like, the second gig he played with them, or his first gig at CBGB, Fred Smith, who sadly passed away again. again passed away. Sorry. Yeah, Fred did it once and he did it twice. There you go. No, sorry. No, I mean, someone else who passed away recently, the bass player in television, but he
Yes.
wound up being the bass player in television because Patti Smith, no relation, but friends with Tom, and said basically, Debbie's not going anywhere. You should. Richard Hell's left television. Tom Verlaine, is looking for a bass player. You should go there. And so he did, and that's how I got in. Because I was living in New York, starving, writing lots of bad poetry, because I saw myself as a poet then. And as I said, I wasn't considered a musician, but I had hung out with lots of musicians
Yes.
in Jersey, and I picked up, I could play an A, B, some chords, bits like that, which is what you needed. And I also was, starving, very skinny, and wore dark glasses all the time. And so I was perfect for the role. And I just, auditioned for them. So this was March, around this time of year, 50 years ago.
Right.
And then, I walked into it. So that was, so I was 19, all of 19.
And
So
how were you getting...
that was a thing. Go ahead, sorry.
No, that's fine. I was going to say, how did you get by for money then? Were you just hustling?
That's a very good question. That's a very, very good question. I talk about that in the book. I mean, before I started playing with those guys, I went through a period I was starving most of the time. I worked as a messenger, but I made just enough money to pay my share of the rent in the squalid, sordid storefront that someone had called a studio, and I was sharing
Right.
a nutcase who's like this guy he was the weirdest guy in Bayonne, New Jersey, where he grew up, and then he went 180 and became a born again Christian while we were living together, and he was trying to get me to be saved as well. And it's like, fuck, excuse me, but you know what I mean. And around that time I started playing with Chris and Debbie, but then he kicked me out, and I was homeless for a while. I mean, I was crashing at people's places and things like that. And then finally I came out at one of the rehearsals that I didn't have a place to sleep. And Debbie didn't want to look for another bass player. So she said, okay, you can crash. And she had this tiny 1-bedroom flat.
Right. And that was
Little
it.
Italy, which now is a tourist, spot, but back then it was just a backwater. I mean, even Soho, New York Soho was a backwater then. It wasn't, a fashionable place.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so I don't know. I mean, I starved. I shoplifted a few times. Then we started to actually we were happy if we got paid enough to get something to eat after the show. Back then in the early days, I mean, at least I was happy then. I'm sure they wanted more, but that was they always seem golden, and when you can recollect them in tranquility. But it was difficult at the time.
I would imagine, yes. So was CBGB's was Max's Kansas City also on the radar at that point?
That started up towards the end of '75.
Right.
So once CB's got going, I mean, CB started up in '74. Oh, well, '73 is when it opened. '74, the TV and Patti Smith started getting lots of press, and Ramones and others started playing. I played there first in July of '75, and by towards the end of the year, Max's came back on the scene. Peter Crowley, who was booking the gigs at a place called Mothers.
It's a lovely little Peter Crowley book there.
All right, there you go. Yeah. Well, it was a place called Mothers on 23rd Street, across from the Chelsea Hotel, the famous Chelsea Hotel, or infamous. And he was booking the gigs there, and then he became the booking person over at Max's as well. And there was a wonderful Christmas party there, 1975, and I said my birthday's Christmas Eve, so I just turned 20. Right. Day before, and then there was this party there that all the people, the Ramones and other people on the scene, and a couple of Blondies, and Wayne County, and some Heartbreakers, and other people on the scene were there. So yeah, I mean it was a different kind of scene than CBGB's, and then other places popped up to play as well.
Well, yes, probably not Studio 54 in your case.
No, not quite. No.
Had Vietnam, had that ever sort of come on the radar as a possible, oh my God, I might get drafted, or was that completely not ever going to happen?
Well, for me, I mean, I said I was, I think the last draft was in '73. Right. And I turned 18 at the end of that. So I had to, well, and what actually in one way you wanted your draft card because you could buy alcohol with it in New York. It showed you were 18, so if you got over to New York, you could buy, whereas in Jersey it was 21.
Right.
But I mean, it was, it's a possibility, but it was winding down
Yes.
then. So it wasn't, at least for me, there wasn't that political sense around what was, anything I was doing or happening.
And were you getting into other, spiritual aspects, drug-related aspects, or cosmic aspects at this point in your life? Was that starting to sort of bubble?
That starts happening. Well, I get introduced to all that kind of thing that I've had a second or third career at writing about for past 30 years. Was where we were living in this after Debbie, Chris, and I were living in her tiny one-bedroom flat in Little Italy. That couldn't be sustained, and we wound up moving took over a floor of a 3-story building, a loft space on the Bowery, which was Skid Row, dead end. It was just homeless and drunks and all that. And CBGB was a block away. William Burroughs from Naked Lunch, William Burroughs, he had his famous bunker.
Oh, the bunker there.
Was not far as well. And the fellow who had the lease on the building and who rented us our floor was this fantastic, flamboyant, gay biker artist, a fellow named Benton Quinn, who was also, he was into Aleister Crowley and he was into magic and all that kind of thing. And I didn't have any interest in that. I mean, I read a lot. I was reading Sartre and Nietzsche and stuff like that, and lots of weird fiction, Lovecraft.
What about Carlos Castaneda? Had he come on your radar?
I was in high school. I read that stuff, and we couldn't get the peyote, but we got a nickel bag of grass, and pretended we were Don Juan, and stuff, all that kind of stuff. It's all in the book. All those kind of adventures are in there. But I didn't have an interest in magic, and my only interest in that sort of stuff was weird fiction like H.P. Lovecraft or like 1930s and 40s horror films, black and white ones, that I watched when I was a kid. But this fellow Benton was into Crowley, and he used to do these impromptu tarot readings with Crowley's tarot deck, and he would read from this book, Diary of a Drug Fiend, which was a novel Crowley wrote about his. He had this an abbé in Sicily in the 1920s and things of that sort, and I just found it fascinating. And there was another book at the time that I read that really changed my life, and this was a book by a British writer, Colin Wilson.
Oh yes,
who died 2013. And he was most famous for a book called The Outsider that came out in the late 50s. And it was kind of a book about existentialism and sort of social misfits. And it was one of the books that kickstarted kind of the beat into the counterculture generation. But he had made a comeback in the early 70s with a book just called The Occult. And this is like the subject of my first book, Turn Off Your Mind. There was this occult boom, this occult revival in the 1960s. So by the end of the decade, publishers are getting writers to, commissioning writers to write books about the occult in different ways. So they commissioned him to write this. And he had first, he was always interested in it, but it wasn't anything he took very seriously. But the story goes that as he did the research for the book, he became more convinced in the reality of these sort of paranormal phenomenon and different states of consciousness and different visions of reality and so on and so on. And here I am, all of 19, playing in a New York rock band, living the life with this, flamboyant, fantastic guy, who's into Crowley around, and I'm reading this book. And it's just incredibly well-written, page-turning book. And it's not just a book of spells and ghost stories, because I didn't know at the time, but Wilson had an earlier career writing about existentialism and things of that sort. So he's bringing this kind of, very analytical, insightful mind into examining these strange figures like Crowley and Madame Blavatsky and Rasputin and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and, strange phenomena. And I'm just completely bowled over by it. Yeah. And I just became fascinated. And at the time, it said it was very popular. So all the bookshops in New York then had these sections on the occult, and there was a famous occult bookshop called Weiser's That was one of the most, well-known ones, and so on and so on. So it was kind of like, oh, you're interested in this stuff? Well, here's more than you ever thought you could read. And so
Yes.
I just gradually over time, what started out as a enthusiastic, fun interest in this became a kind of, more of a serious pursuit of trying to understand its influence in modern culture.
And thus the song that appeared in your...
Oh yeah, well, that was the other thing too. My first foray into writing about this was a song, because I started. Well, the story is that the first Blondie tour, first North American tour, we were the support band for Iggy and Iggy Pop, and Iggy Pop had been sort of resurrected by David Bowie.
Yes.
And Bowie was playing. He was the incognito keyboardist
on the side of the stage
on the tour. And again, this is long before the internet or mobile phones or anything like that, social media. So word of mouth, was how people found out that Bowie's playing, Bowie's in the band,
yes.
Things like that. So, but whenever I wanted to call my girlfriend at the time, Lisa Jane Persky, who's a well-known actress, and she wrote for New York Rocker, one of the magazines at the time, and was a photographer, and so on and so on. She would be just about to call me. She had a list of the hotels we were at. So if I was in Chicago and I was going to call back to New York, she would answer the phone and say, I was just going to call you. And again, this is back in the day where you had to be at one place at one time in order to make a phone call.
God, I remember it well.
Yeah, I mean, it's no time. You can't not like, again, this is strange. Kind of, what you mean? You had to be like in some place. So I tell you, it's things like that strike me. These mundane kind of ways of life that change, they strike me as more, what's the word? Convincing that our notions of time and things like that have changed than any kind of mystical kind of thing. Because my sons, I'm sorry it's a tangential, but my sons have grown up, they're in their 20s, so they don't remember landlines or anything like that. It wasn't
well, yes.
so the idea that like, oh yeah, you had to be there. It's just like watching something on television. I remember when I was growing up in television, if you wanted to, there was some show on, it was on at a certain time, and you had to be,
But the interesting thing was that we then had a shared cultural experience the next day in the playground, whereas now people can be in social situations and, oh, did you see such and such? Because it's on that channel, and it's sort of tumbleweed. Whereas in those days, it's like, oh, did you see The Godfather, or did you see The Young Ones? And everybody the next day would say, yes, I saw The Young Ones. But now, and there was that shared experience. Whereas now, culturally, people are, what channel's that? All they can reply is, no, I haven't seen it. What channel? Oh no, I don't have that. So
it's all kind of fractured into these mini, multiple kinds of. What do you want to call it?
Interesting.
Sort of personal culture, like you have personal technology and kind of your little personal culture world.
Yes. Well, why everybody in this country at a certain age all saw the Mike Leigh play, which was on television, Abigail's Party in the 70s, was that there was only 3 channels. And I think there was a strike that night. So in fact, there was only one thing to watch on telly. So the entire nation in Little Britain, Great Britain, watched this thing. So we all remember watching this program because it was the only thing on. So in a way, we kind of miss that in a way because... yes, there is that shared conversation.
I mean, I guess it's it's a difficult choice between being spoiled for choice or being very limited. So it's
but we also had boredom, didn't we? Which I thought was quite important, and having to create stuff. But with your girlfriend at the time and your moment, is that then you sort of put pen to paper and went, right? I've got an idea for a song.
It's one of those things. Where did it come from? I just remember I must have just strummed a chord, and the next one, and the first lines of the song came out. I mean, when I was writing songs, they either came out in 5 minutes, or they didn't come out.
They didn't come out.
You had a fraction. So it's very, very different than learning how to, write readable prose, and not only readable prose that someone will pay you to write. So that took me a good 10 years to learn how to do that. But when I was writing songs, it just came out. And I think one of the reasons that happened was that I had no preconceptions. I knew I wasn't a great guitarist. I was never going to play Steve Howe or whatever, any of these guys, Fripp,
Chris
nothing like
Squire
that.
or
Yeah, no, I
John,
mean,
John.
or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I'm never going to play anything like that, but I can get something out of this. And it was exciting to me to put two chords together or put a bass line together, not just saying, okay, what are the chords? I'll just, and you learn as you go, which is really one of the things. I mean, it's kind of a joke to say like, well, the bands at CBGBs, most of them, people watching them learn how to play. But in one sense, it was true because it had that edginess where we weren't pros. I mean, the early Blondie days, we were a mess half the times. I mean, Chris would look at the guitar as if it just landed in his hands. It's like, what is this thing? And Debbie would forget the lines. We would all make, but that was one of the exciting things. And then, then you kind of, that wonderful period is where you're able to kind of capture that nervy energy on the edge before it becomes so pro that it's just, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, well, you're a good band. It's good songs, but it doesn't have that kind of electricity.
I think sort of there's a sort of naive innocence mixed with sort of arrogance, isn't there, with youth, which you can't capture when you get older, when you've had mishaps, problems, your heart pulled out and slammed on the pavement, and it just doesn't sort of work. That's why I suppose so many great songs are written when you're quite young. I'm not saying that all people write the great songs when they're young, but it is obviously a bit of a correlation, isn't there?
Yeah, I've always said it's a young person's art in a way.
Yes.
I mean, you can love somebody, but then you can listen to them their whole career. But the best songs are usually in the early days.
Yes. Did you? Because I mentioned my first single was Space Oddity. The second one was A Girl Confessed, Rod Stewart, Sailing. The third one was Blondie's Denis Denis. Did you feature on that particular single?
Oh no, I'm not. No, I don't. I only play on tunes from the first album and on this some stuff that's been like cutouts of that.
Right.
Or these early tapes we did with the fellow Alan Betrock, who was he published and edited the New York Rocker magazine.
Yes.
He did a book about girl groups and all that. But no, I mean, one of the strange things that's never been released, but it's on YouTube as far as I know, was a track. I don't mention it in this book because this is only up until before I leave the States to have my new life here in London. But this happened after that. But I do mention this. I do tell the story in an earlier memoir called New York Rocker.
Yes.
It came out in 2002, and that's strictly about my life and sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But what I'm getting to is in 1996. Strangely enough, just after I moved here, Chris Stein got in touch with me and said that he wanted to put the band back together, and would I be interested in coming to New York and rehearsing and all this kind of stuff. And so I had just come here. I just turned 40 and I'm here starting a new life, and suddenly like, yeah, okay, yep, I'm up for anything, bang. So I wound up going back and living with Chris in this enormous space he had in Tribeca, part of New York, the triangle below Canal Street. But this was before they did their, what was it? Was it No Exit? I forget the name of it.
Oh, the one with
their comeback.
The Maria song.
Maria, yeah. So, but I recorded a song of mine with them, except Chris didn't turn up for the sessions. And it's a song called Amor Fati, which means love of fate. And it was a song I used to do with my band, The No. So the music and the lyrics, and I wound up playing all the guitars on the track. We did it in the Hit Factory in New York, and the bass. It's Clem on drums, Jimmy on keyboards. He produced and Debbie singing. But it was originally supposed to be on that album, and then it wasn't, and then it's been like this phantom track that they had an opportunity to release it recently. They did this box set a couple of years back. It was Against the Odds or something like that. It was all this kind of, it was like, well, they've done several kind of compilation best of things, but this was kind of like the definitive, here it is. But no, it should still be up on YouTube. You mean
right? Well, I'll check.
Okay. I most recently, when after Clem passed away, I said, I was talking to the manager and saying, you really should release that track because it's got some great drumming on it by Clem. But There you
Who
go.
knows? And did you, at that stage, did you have a manager with the band at that point, or were you self-managed? Blondie, that
Well, the
is.
only time I had a manager was when I was in Blondie, and one of the reasons I was not in Blondie is because of the manager.
Right.
So I've always had I've always been put off by managers and agents since then. So I mean I'm a one man show here. So
Yes, I do seem to
uh,
remember a documentary where Chris mentions a manager for Blondie, and he wasn't very pleased.
well, there's I don't want to name any names, but it's in well, I think it's in that book. There's a story in there, but yeah, I didn't trust the fellow, but I was basically coerced into signing the contract. But I later had the gratification to see that they saw that I was correct, and I think they had to pay some enormous amount of money to get out of the contract with him down the line.
Right. Yes. So what was it like then, sort of leaving that particular band, and then forming your second band, the
Well,
No?
I mean, I decided to do it because well, after well, it was on the UK tour. Blondie did, where we were the support act for television. So Marquee Moon was a huge hit over here.
Yes.
And it was funny at those concerts because I mean, television, even though they kind of put CBGB on the map, they were very atypical of the sound that came out of there because they were a guitar band. You know, Verlaine and Lloyd played off each other, and they were just, you know, two very different guitar styles, but they worked wonderfully together. But you know, they did these long jams and stuff like that, where you know the Ramones are a minute and a half, 2 2 minute song. You know, I remember the Ramones. I think they did a 19-minute set once, and it was just like bang, 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 bang. So you know, very fast. You know, and Blondie, you know, this kitschy '60s retro kind of stuff. So very, very different. But here, that Marquee Moon was a huge hit, and then you had these kind of Grateful Dead-ish sort of fans filling up most of the theaters, and then to be a little kind of punk contingent come to hear Blondie. But I just was so impressed by television. I was so impressed. I just thought, you know, you know, the press were treating them like they were the saviors of rock, and it was a bit much. But in the end, I thought, well, actually, they warrant the praise that they were, you know, being given, because they were a very good band. And I just came away saying, well, that's what I want to do. I mean, one of the things that was happening is I wanted to play guitar in my songs, because on the first Blondie recording, the first 45 Ex Offender, I'm playing guitar on it, and Chris played bass, and it was something we used to do in the act. And this is something that I could understand, but you know, this was me. I just thought, you know, I just want to play guitar in my songs. And so that became a kind of point of contention. And then, I don't know, they didn't like that I jumped around. And I had seen Wilco Johnson.
Yes, Wilco.
Dr. Feelgood. And so.
And I think Bruce Foxton as well was a bit of a jumper, wasn't he, really?
Yeah, I picked that up. And so, but it was fun. I mean, it just wasn't like, hey, look at me. It was just kind of, I'm into it, you know. But whatever. So I just decided, okay. I thought, okay, well, look, we're rehearsing all the music for the second album, because I'm always touched by your presence, dear, you know, which is the song about the psychic experiences. And I was going to say, you know, I didn't finish that story. Lisa and I, we would have the same dreams. We would have shared dreams. We would be talking about how, oh, I dreamt about this last night. Oh my God, so did I, and that kind of thing. So the song "I'm Always Touched by Your Presence," which is like the Blondie's second hit, and that's on the second album, Plastic Letter. So I had written that and, you know, worked on that, and all the other tunes on that album. And there was a couple others of mine that were going to be on that as well. One song that later became my first 45, called The First One, aptly enough. But in any case, I worked on all that stuff, and then I thought, okay, look, let's do this album, and then you know, I'll leave amicably, and whatever, I'll follow my destiny, whatever happens. Lisa was pursuing her acting career, and she wanted to go to Hollywood, which one does if you're doing that, and so leave New York, and she left it up to me whether to follow her or not. So I wanted to be with her, and I thought, okay, I'll go to LA. And, you know, we were there for a couple weeks already playing Blondie, and you know, we had became popular, and people knew about us and all that, so I'd have a chance to sort of band. So I just thought that out. But then once I communicated that in my innocent naivete, manager said, well, forget about it. We don't need you anymore. Funnily enough, it was like I got what they call the pink slip in America on Independence Day.
Right. What
So
is the pink slip?
July 4th, 1977. So the 4th of July in America. So it's with the Declaration of Independence. So
Right.
I thought that was an apt day to receive word that my services were no longer required.
My God, that must be quite something, though. But at that age,
as I write about in the book, was it destiny? Well, yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, people may say, "Oh, gee, God, you weren't famous. You didn't have blah blah blah." It would have been nice, but I don't know. I think maybe what I did in music is what I did, and I've gone now. I've written 27 books.
Well, yes,
So,
absolutely.
that's like, I don't know. That's more than some albums people make. So, what do you want me to say?
Yes, well, absolutely. So the No happened in the early 80s, and then you did your Iggy Pop moment, and that was with another guitarist, wasn't there, in the band? Who I can't.
Well, yes, I got that gig. A friend named Rob Dupre, who was the guitarist with the Mumps. And they were one of the bands, CBGB bands, that didn't get signed, but they were well known. And
because they had Lance Loud, didn't they?
Yeah, I was going to say Lance Loud, who was he's came to fame in the early '70s in the first reality TV show, at least in America, one of the first, called An American Family, and this was this documentary where the Loud family were just filmed night and day for I forget how long of a stretch. But then lots of stuff happens during it. So, but
it's his sexuality, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that he was gay came out, and lots of other stuff. So this is pretty wild for early '70s. It was PBS, the public broadcasting system in the States, so not on the mainstream channels. But in any case, Rob started playing with Iggy, and they were about to go on a tour when Ivan Krall, who was someone else who had played with Debbie in the very early days of Blondie and had played with Patti Smith and was a filmmaker as well. He was in their band, but he jumped ship. He decided he didn't want to go on tour. So they needed another guitarist. And I had my band, we didn't get a deal. We played in LA, New York, came close a few times, put out one single with Planet Records, but it sank. Nothing happened with it. My own single, when it first came out, first one, it got some notoriety and all.
Is this I Like Girls?
Yeah, I mean, it was that wasn't our choice, but I forget the guy who did it, who produced it for us. But it was kind of like, whatever. Do you want to do it or not? I said, okay, fine. On the B side of that is some song we just wrote. We got a part in a TV film called "Cry for Love" about someone's. So two drug addicts trying to kick the habit, and there's some scene in a punk club in downtown LA, and we're the band in it. So we just came up with some song for that. So in any case. So I had hung my Stratocaster on the wall, as it were, and Rob asked me, so do you want to play? I said, okay, fine. And it was Iggy, I knew the old songs, and I learned the new ones basically like the week before we left, and it was wild. So, but then the second tour, it was like a super band because it was Rob on guitar, I was on guitar, and then also Carlos Alomar.
Right.
Who was Bowie's guitarist, and Clem Burke was the drummer.
Blimey.
So it was, it was, and that was that lineup. We opened for the Stones in the Silver Dome.
Right, because he had done New Values, hadn't he? In the sort of '79, then he did Soldier.
Well, this was Party. It was an album called Party that with I think it was Arista Records, and the brief was I think this was the make or break. If this album didn't do well, they weren't going to renew his contract, and it was sort of our brief was like, well, the album's called Party. So that's what we're going to do. It was like really, and it was the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, But one of the stories I tell in the book is about how one of the two shows we did in the Silver Dome, it was Iggy, Santana, and the Stones. and nobody was there to see Iggy Pop, and they threw everything they could possibly get their hands on at us. No, I mean everything. And if you know these huge stadium gigs, it's just pitch dark. Maybe you see the big lighters or something, but it's pitch dark, and suddenly things are just coming out of the darkness, at you while you're staying. So yeah, it was it was quite a night.
God, yes, because he does Bang Bang, which I think Bowie covers, and then he does Pumping for Jill. It wasn't a great album, was it?
Yeah, I mean, the ones that people wanted to hear were the old, the Lust for Life and things like that. And but no, I remember now just thinking of it. There is a video of one gig we did in San Francisco on that tour, and it's Clem on it, and it starts with Lust for Life, and that's like Clem Burke, when he's hitting them, it's just this.
Well, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
There you go. Yes, did Iggy sort of teach you how to be a rock star? Because I did an interview with Rob, and he said that once Iggy, I don't know, this was years ago. He said he pulled him to one side and said, "This is how you're going to have to be if you're going to be in my band." Did Iggy give you a few tips on how to be a rock star?
Well, not directly, but from listening to the albums and watching. I mean, one of the first rock concerts I saw, not attended, but was on TV. It was this really weird one. Alice Cooper was in it, but Iggy Pop was in it too. So one of the first things I saw was like him kind of, with the peanut butter and stuff like that. But no, he wanted me to write a song with him. And unfortunately at this time, one of the reasons I enjoyed doing these tours, because I was just a hired gun. I wasn't leading the band. I wasn't writing the songs. I just was playing guitar, just playing rhythm guitar, really. Because Rob was a better lead guitar. So I was this chunky, rhythm section every now and then doing a little something. But, so I was happy to do that. But he kind of wanted me to write a song. And I don't know. I wasn't inspired to write, I got too smart for rock and roll by then. I was reading too many things. And I had wanted to try to write the sort of thing that I'm doing now.
Yes.
I couldn't do anything like that then at all. No, it was just, but I that was kind of the urge I wanted to do, and I just couldn't think of, So I think he was disappointed in that. But there you go. You can't force the muse. If you do, if you do, it's not any good. I mean, that was one of the things I always learned. If I consciously tried to write a song in the sense of, okay, let's put that chord, put together. If it doesn't come up immediately, some kind of jingle jangle thing that, there you go, and it just didn't work.
Was music during that period a little bit tricky? Because one thing I have noticed that with a lot of musicians, they have that, most bands have a 5-year narrative. This is my sweeping statement, especially indie pop in the 80s. They get together, the 12-month honeymoon, they get a single, John Peel plays it, get a John Peel session. Then suddenly, things start to move. They get the transit van, they start touring the UK. Let's stick with the UK. They get the record deal. They get the first album, things are going well. They get the second album, a few bigger tours, a bit bigger bus, bigger tours and stuff like that. By the third album in the 5th year, things are sort of falling apart. And then with a lot of musicians, the next wave of 16 to 18-year-olds come along, and a lot of people are just out of sync. You can really feel that they're slightly grappling in the dark, trying to work out what to do next, And so when you look at people's work from the 70s, which are amazing, you get, what about the 80s? And went, oh my God, that's not great, is it? Did you feel a little bit out of sort of with the 80s coming along?
Oh, I mean, I completely lost interest in pop music. I mean, it's one of the things I talk about in the book. Two reasons pulled me away from continuing on. Well, 3. One was that my band didn't get a deal. We came close, so we didn't get a deal. I lost the inspiration to write songs. I mean, the main inspiration was my girlfriend Lisa. So she inspired not only Presence Here, but other songs as well. And we separated, and I kind of lost that muse. And I also started getting interested in classical music.
Right.
So girlfriend I had at a time, or an affair I had with a woman at the time after Lisa and I separated, she was this beautiful model. And she came back from a photo shoot in Tokyo with a Walkman. And she, honest to God, she was one of the first people in New York with one of these things. And she let me borrow it. And I had this ghetto blaster where I was like listening to cassettes of, Beethoven or these kind of stuff like that. So I borrowed this thing and I started walking around New York with it. And I mean, I don't know if you remember the first effect of, wearing headphones outside and, listening.
Yes.
For me, it was like, oh my God, I'm in a film. Suddenly it's like, the soundtrack. And I used to go to the Hudson. I used to go to the old piers along the Hudson and just listen to Mahler. I mean, we had seen the Visconti film no, it wasn't Visconti. No, yeah, well, the Visconti film of Death in Venice that has some fun bits from Mahler's Fifth Symphony in it. And I would sit there listening to that and watch these oil tankers down the Hudson. I was just transfixed by it. So I just became more and more interested in listening to classical music. And again, that was something that pulled me away from. It also led to the deterioration of the affair, because she was saying, "What are you listening to? Why aren't you listening to?"
Yes.
Stuff instead. But,
so then you went to university to do a degree in philosophy from California University?
Yeah.
And then so what was the kind of, did you just feel that you needed some grounding or balance or mental stimulation?
No, what had happened, I moved back to Los Angeles for a long stretch at the beginning of 1982. And lived off royalties from presence here for a while. And but at one point, a friend just said, "You read all these books, but why don't you go back to university?" And I'm still in my mid to late 20s, I guess. I would have been a mature student, and so I just said, "Okay, why not?" But my career choice after rock and roll was thinking I was going to teach philosophy, which is something my professors, they found incomprehensible. They said, this is boring as hell. Why do you want to do this? We want to do what you used to do. But I just, at random, I just picked, it wasn't calculated, just kind of, okay, let's see what happens. And I picked a university and went there and found that I was good at it. So I got a degree in philosophy, and then I was going to... No, seriously, I was considering going on to, get the master's and then whatever I needed to be able to teach it. But I had got involved with someone where I was working. I was, at the same time as I was earning a degree in philosophy, I was working at a New Age bookshop. It's a place called the Bodhi Tree, which isn't there anymore, but it was very, very well known in the 80s, 90s, into the early 2000s.
Well, yes. And so with your mind then, did the sort of the New Age bookshop and the titles on the shelves, did they sort of inspire at this stage?
Well, I've been continually reading, all the stuff that I'd started reading in New York. So I was, different people, different, teachers, Steiner and Gurdjieff and, many, many others, Zen Buddhism, and I was just always interested in lots of these things. I would read as much as I could get my hands on. And then you're in the shop, so all these things are there. But it was a weird combination of studying Hegel and Wittgenstein during the day.
Yes.
And I worked most evenings because the shop is open until 11. And then going and then talking to people about their aura, or figuring out what crystal would be best for them, or something like that. So it was a strange combination, these two sorts of things. And but it was from working at the shop that I started writing, because they had a kind of catalog they put out that had a book review section, and they asked me to review books. So I started reviewing books there.
Right.
And one of the reviews attracted the attention of the author, and he came and he wanted to tell me how much he enjoyed the review, and he invited me to write for a journal he was editing. And so one thing after the other, I started to, get stuff published. But I was sort of like, well, I wasn't writing enough that I could make a living at it yet. I was happy to just get some stuff published in these journals. And I was thinking, I don't know, maybe I should be doing something more than working at a bookshop. So I thought I would try university again, and I went and I did a year at University of Southern California, but in the English department, because their philosophy department, I didn't care for what they had on offer. But this was like a desperate thing of trying to find something to do with myself, because that was a non-starter, trying to do this degree, and I did one year of a master's, but this was when the PC thing had become very visible. The political correctness kind of thing, and I was just I just wasn't interested in all of the very fashionable kinds of approaches, deconstructionism or feminist theory or post-colonial. I was an old romantic humanist,
right?
And they had why are you here? why are you? And I realized I'm never going to get a job. I could do this, I could do the work, I know I could do this, and blah 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 blah. But by the time I'm finished with it, I'll be in my mid to late 30s, and a white guy, then I'll never get a job at doing this. So I dropped out of that.
Right. So, because it's interesting, because during that late 80s and then in the 90s, I became very immersed in the New Age world and sort of became obsessed with ley lines and corn circles and, like you mentioned, auras. And then there was obviously a lot of spiritual appropriation at this point, because everyone was doing their North American Indian rituals in sweat lodges. And, it was one of those things. I remember at dinner parties, you could go almost through the A to Z of what alternative things you've done, from sort of acupuncture to Bach flower remedy to colonic irrigation through dance and all that. So were you kind of embracing everything that you could get at this point?
Well, I said I was a well, I was the rational one when I was at the bookshop, and I was the one who was too open-minded about the paranormal and the mystical when I was at university. So I was occupying this mid space between the two. But I became very interested in different things. I became very interested in Jung, the psychology of Carl Jung. I wound up writing a book about Jung. I became very interested in Rudolf Steiner, who's behind biodynamic farming and Waldorf education. I've written, so later went on to write a book about him. So, a variety of different things I became interested in, and we check things out, and things of that sort. I mean, something I became involved in for a few years was the Gurdjieff system of it's known as the Fourth Way, or known as the Work. He was an enigmatic Greco-Armenian esoteric teacher in the first half of the 20th century, who came. Well, he wound up. Well, he wound up here for a while, but then he set up camp in France, in Fontainebleau, outside of Paris. And he had a whole kind of psychological system about, I mean, it sounds kind of banal to sort of say, but it basically is central ideas. We believe that we have free will. We believe we're conscious. We believe, we're not mechanical, but actually we are all those things. But there's a way, not to be, and they always have some, some carrot. There's the stick, and there's the carrot, and so that. So I pursued this for some years, and actually had some interesting results. And so, I mean, I've always had more of a let's check it out and see what happens.
Right. Were you also at this stage working on your own self, dealing with your own issues in life?
When aren't you? I'm dealing with there. I mean, there's a whole, whole other thing in there. There's the whole. I mean, I won't give it away too much, but the end of the book is this whole crack up where the marriage falls apart. I was working at once again trying to find some place for myself in the real world. I was working at another university, University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, as a science writer of all things, which I should never have the job because I have no background in science. But I'd written quite a few articles about pop science, chaos theory, and complexity, things of that sort. So all during this time, I'm trying to find some place for myself. So I went through a stretch where, I was never a rock star, but I was in the vicinity of some, and I had that life. I did that, quite some time. My contribution was small, but not negligible, put it that way. But then I, left that to want to pursue something I felt deeper in some way, but I couldn't quite articulate that. So it took me 10 years, from stop. I guess the last time I stopped at the end of 81, so 82, and I started getting things published in magazines about 92 and 93 or something like that. So it took a long time to do that. And I didn't get my first book contract to 98 when I had already moved here. So that was a long-term goal to do that, which I had to focus on and deal with a lot of.
Yes, because at the end of the book, you've got a lot of, because it changes, you have a lot of kind of I was going to say S and M, but you just have a lot of you start taking out people's names, don't you?
Taking out people's names.
Well, not so you refer to people as S or M.
Oh. Well, I mean, I didn't. Yeah, I try. I don't know why. I tried to. It was a stylistic decision I made early on in the book that I would just, and not out of any kind of malice or anything, but it was about, okay, I'll only name the people I absolutely have to. You might notice I don't name my parents, I don't name my sister. So it's not an autobiography, but you usually get all those kind of factual data.
Yes.
So memoir is usually about one particular aspect or feature or important part of your life, and so that's in there. But no, I mean it's that's someone that this S is someone that I met in the Czech Republic of all places, on a conference about the Rosicrucians. And don't ask me who the Rosicrucians are. We'll go down a rabbit hole.
Yes, but, I was curious.
he was someone that I knew from California, but we knew obliquely. We knew through a mutual friend, but we never really got together and hung out and discovered how much we had in common and things of that sort. But at encountering each other at this place, we said, oh my God, yeah, because he had similar interests as mine and all that kind of. He's a filmmaker. He'd done some sort of well-known cult kind of horror films and so on and so on. But it was through him that I wound up moving to the UK, moving to London.
Right.
Because he was thinking of doing that. And he said, well, look, I'm thinking of spending some time in London for a while. I know some people in the film industry there, blah, 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 blah. I had told him my sad story at this point. The reason I ran into him in the Czech Republic is because after my marriage broke up, I lost this job as a science writer at UCLA. I went down the tubes. Whether I was technically, pathologically depressed or not, I don't know, but it was a very, very bad, very, very bad time. And I wound up going to this conference because a magazine I was writing for at the time was one of the sponsors for it. So I decided, okay, whatever else happens, I'm going to that.
Right.
So it often helps, to get through some really difficult time if you give yourself some goal, some aim, like come hell or high water, damn the torpedoes, I'm going to that thing. Yes. So that's basically what I did. And so after the collapse of my life, the shock waves after that sent me to the Czech Republic, and I bumped into him. And so I told him my story, and he said, well, look, if you want to change the scenery, come to London. Let's get a flat, see what happens, all that. So I wound up doing that, but strangely enough, this is the beginning of the follow-up, which I haven't written about yet. As soon as I got here and met him, he told me that he had changed his mind and he was going to LA. And so I wound up, house sitting and for people I didn't even know the place where he was living. But I'm telling the story I haven't written yet.
God, that's quite a cosmic thing. So this book finishes 30 years ago. So what was it like then? Was this kind of written during the lockdown period? Did you start?
No, it's if you take a peek at the acknowledgments in the back, I say that this book was written during a very difficult time, quite literally to keep me sane. And I don't go into any detail about it, but I'll put it briefly that I had neighbors from hell above me. Literally, the noise was just driving me out of my mind. And I spent a lot of time at the British Library anyway, but I was practically living there. I'd finished one book and I didn't have any work. And I'm one of these writers who's always complaining that he needs a break. And as soon as he gets one, he has no idea what to do with himself. And so I was staying away from my flat as much as I possibly could.
Yes.
Because otherwise I would axe murder, these people. And so I just start writing. So I have to write something. So I just started saying, well, no, people often ask me, how did I go from playing in rock music to doing what I'm doing now? Well, how did I? So I just went like that. And it was like I had no idea. I wasn't going to pitch it to anyone. I didn't, I didn't write a proposal and get in touch with my editors, anything like that. I just wrote it for myself.
Yes.
And see what would happen. And it's kind of spoiled me because that's what I want to do now. I don't want to do anything other now than like, let's do part 2, see what happens.
Did you find it very healing then? Was this a kind of a healing process of writing?
Well, I didn't do it on purpose. It wasn't like, just let's, if anything, it was a kind of assertion of my being at the time when I felt it was being eroded by, I say, I think in the book, I say I'm 67. I turned 70 at the end of last year. So I was around 67 when I was writing it. And at that time, I was thinking, this can't be my life. I'm afraid to go back to my flat. The noise is just, murderous. The people running the place don't care. They're not doing anything. The people causing the noise are completely antisocial.
Yes.
I wound up staying in hotels for a bit, just to get some quiet. I mean, I remember finishing the last chapter of the book in a hotel room. Sounds very romantic, but it was quite expensive.
I would imagine, yes.
And so it was kind of an existential assertion of my being, to stop it from being eroded by this, chaos around me.
Yes.
In the process, it's one of those things you discover something as you're doing it, So, and especially this because it was open ended. I didn't. I said I didn't make an outline or anything. It was just okay. Let's just go. Let's just see. And for a long time, I just called it notes toward an autobiography or something like that. I didn't. It wasn't really a book yet.
Yes.
But then at the end, I just sent it to an editor, one of my publishers, who's I appreciated his taste, and I said, look, this might not be something that's good, for the publishing company, but I just appreciate hearing what you have to say about it. And he really liked it, so he's the one who commissioned it and for the publisher.
But I mean, that is quite incredible, actually. And with a lot of the characters and the people you've met during that time, have you had connections with them since then? Those early girlfriends, relationships.
Well, Lisa, we're still friends. She's the oldest friend. We're still in touch and with each other's presence. And not too many people in the music world.
Well, I just wondered about your very early girlfriend, who
through the miracle of Facebook, you hear from people every now and then.
Yes.
And I mean some other people from later in my life that I don't mention in the book. When I go to LA, I see or run into people there because I know more people. I mean, I don't really know anyone in New York anymore. But when I go back to LA, I do see some people there.
So did you know what happened to your first girlfriend who became pregnant? Was there any more to that story?
I don't know, to tell you the truth. I mean, it's one of those things like you think what would have, I don't know how much I want to talk about it because it is, if had the child not, died in hospital, it would be, 50.
Yes.
It's it's very, very difficult. What's the word? I mean, it's a kind of mundane tragedy. I mean, it happens every day, but when it happens to you, and again, but it's such a long time ago. I mean,
yes.
One of the things I regret is, it happening at all, but what can you say?
Well, I know. Well, it's tricky. And then, so, because the book is, I mean, mostly for people who haven't read it and or should go and buy a copy. I mean, a lot of it does deal with your more the esoteric part of your life. You know, and that kind of journey with people like Colin Wilson and Crowley and other bits. So what I was kind of curious and interested by was because having known quite a lot of people who got into that world, you know, they do sort of get pulled into a sort of almost like a cult sort of state of mind. Did you sort of resist, or did you manage to navigate that without getting too sort of kind of wanting to find a guru in your life that was going to sort of save you?
No. I mean, I sort of say in the book, I always kind of had an experimental, or dare I say it, scientific view, in the sense of let's check it out and see what happens. So I mean, the first practice anything like this that I got involved in was actually with Aleister Crowley. When I left New York and moved to Los Angeles, I got involved with the Crowley group there, and okay, let's see what happens. So did the rituals, did some of these things, and blah 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 blah. But it turned out to be more of a kind of Aleister Crowley fan club than anything else. And then after a while, I got quite tired of Crowley. It's very claustrophobic. I mean, he's a wonderful, fabulous raconteur, and had this incredible life and all that. But after a while, you get the impression that all roads lead to Crowley, and it's kind of claustrophobic, very stuffy atmosphere. I mean, it had this enormous ego, and practically everybody who got involved with him came to a bad end in some way, and all that. And I had my own run-in with a kind of Crowley wannabe kind of character, and wannabe not so much in the sense of being a powerful magus and all that, but a kind of a cult freeloader, getting others to pick up the bill and all that kind of thing. So I briefly touch on that story in the book, and I guess say a cult, but I mean, when I was involved with the Gurdjieff work, it was for about four years, so it was something a bit more. What do you want to say? I was kind of stuck with it longer.
Yes.
But I always resisted, the idea that it becomes a whole way of life. See, that's I think a lot of people, or at least many people, get involved in these things because they want some kind of substitute for real life in some way. So, someone who becomes absolutely, devoted, say, to Rudolf Steiner, it's like, okay, you know what to eat, what not to eat, and or a variety of different things like that. And whereas I became quite interested in Steiner, and I practiced some of the exercises because I wanted to see what would happen.
Yes.
And I think he has some very important insights into human consciousness and its relationship to the outer world and all that kind of thing. But one can learn from that and even assimilate that without having to buy the whole package and things of that sort. So I'm more of that. I'm not that interested in having some teaching and here's what you do all the time for it. I'm more like, what can I learn something from that? Can I apply it to my life in some way? And then things change. Things change over time. Too. I mean, there's some things that say maybe 20, 30 years ago I would have been more interested in. I'm not as interested in them. And now, I mean, I'm not that interested in the occult per se now.
Right.
I'm not denying it, but I'm kind of I've said what I have to say about it.
Did you find that? Sorry.
Okay. I was going to say, to tell you the truth, it seems nowadays it seems to have become something that's much more center of what's happening in the world. The kind of weird stuff that used to be on the fringe. That's one thing. This book I did about Trump. Was all the strange occult politics around his first administration seemed very, very strange and odd and all that. But then there's so many weird things now right at the heart of it. So it's a strange time. So I'm kind of like, I want to get away from all this very strange stuff and let's find a bit more sanity.
Yes, because actually you mentioned Steve Bannon in the book, don't you? And the place that we visited in America, which is it Bias?
Biosphere.
Yes. Did you ever go there to have a look at this?
No, I didn't go there. No.
Yeah, it was just quite interesting. There's an amazing story with the people who set that up. I don't know if you've done any kind of research on them, because they were sort of a theatrical group, weren't they, who built a ship and then they built this place and then Banham and his mates shut them out.
Yeah. No, I mean, well, I did a bit because I mentioned it in Touched by Your Presence, but I think a bit more detail in Dark Star Rising, which is a book about Trump and going into like Bannon's background. Yeah, because some of it's touches. It's reviving the brain cells. Because there's a book from a book from a Russian sort of astrophysicist philosopher in the early 20th century that the whole idea of it's the biosphere, but what's the other one? The noosphere, which is the biosphere is the sphere of the life, and then the noosphere is the mental or the mind kind of thing. And a lot of what's in that book went into the original idea of the biosphere thing. And Bannon, he's, well, I mean, unsavory character, but he's dipped into a variety of different kind of occult and esoteric sorts of things. I mean, this is 20th century Italian esoteric far right thinker named Julius Evola that was an influence on the alt-right. Remember them? They're not around anymore, but he was a big influence on them, and influence also on this fellow Alexander Dugin, who he's not as much in the news as he was, but he was kind of around Putin in some ways, some of his very, very strange geopolitical ideas reaching him and all that. So this is weird kind of shadowy, and again, it's not a conspiracy. I'm not interested in conspiracy theories, anything like that whatsoever. All you have to do is do your homework, and you can see these ideas are floating around and all that.
Yes. Absolutely. And with Britain and its kind of earth energy, did you explore, Glastonbury, Avebury, Stonehenge?
Oh, yeah.
And the
I mean,
Leyland?
in 1983, I came on what I subsequently called a mini search for the miraculous. Part of which was a pilgrimage to Cornwall, Gorin Haven, to visit Colin Wilson. But along the way, I went to Glastonbury, I went to Avebury, Stonehenge, and then down in Cornwall, the Merry Maidens, and some other. Yeah, I mean, I tell a story of being on Glastonbury tour and bumping into a woman of a certain age who had the dowsing stick in her hand and all that, and she asking me if I wanted to try it, and I did, and I actually felt something. Although when I put my back against one of the Merry Maidens down in Penzance and tried to feel the megalithic tingle, it didn't quite come through, but it was fantastic anyway being down there. I mean, that was an incredible trip. And in France we went to Chartres Cathedral and also went to the site of Gurdjieff's Institute for the Harmonious Development of Man that he had in the 1920s in Fontainebleau Forest outside of Paris. And so I went on a whole kind of journey for a couple months.
Because there's an amusing story where you talking to David Bowie about Colin Wilson, and it seemed like I can't quite remember because I just sort of looked at it, read it a few days ago. But there was a sort of amusing sort of conversation that I don't know. Are you disagreeing with each other, or is confused?
Well, I mean, I basically get thrown out of his Manhattan loft. It's probably 1981, and I was invited with a friend who was invited to his loft, and I was invited with the friend, and we showed up, and Bowie he always had an interest in the occult and all that kind of stuff. So conversation was something to do with the occult, and there was a lull, and my friend said, "Oh, well, Gary, he knows about the occult because he reads Colin Wilson," and at the name of Colin Wilson, Bowie says, "Colin Wilson, he heads a coven in Cornwall, and he draws pentagrams on the doors of his neighbors and things like that." And I'd yet to meet Wilson, but I'd been reading quite a bit of him, and I said, "Well, I don't think he really does that, I mean, I'm just innocent, naive me. I don't think think he does that. Oh, yes, he does. And he talks about him drawing down the spirits of Nazis, all this weird kind of stuff. He was being inspired. I will leave it to the audience's imagination what form his inspiration was coming in. But gradually I see that I'm making a scene, because I'm disagreeing with him about something.
Yes.
And I'm not doing it on purpose. I'm just saying, well, I really don't think that's the case. And so he had Bowie had these two female bodyguards, and in the book I reference I think it's Diamonds Are Forever, one of the last Sean Connery James Bond films, and there are these two female assassins, Thumper and Bambi, in there. And so these two big girls that Bowie had there, they come up to me and they say, David's tired. We think you should leave. So they walked me out. So there you go. But I subsequently realized what had happened. He had misread or misremembered. There's a passage in Wilson did a book called Mysteries that came out in 1978, and it was a big follow-up to the occult. And in it, he talks about a Cambridge Don named T.C. Lethbridge, who had a second career as a sort of paranormal investigator. And he lived in Devon. And Lethbridge, in one of his books, tells the story of one of his neighbors who was a witch.
Right.
Who went around and used to not draw actual pentagrams, but imagine it, visualize pentagrams and have them, at the front of her neighbor's doors. She said, well, the reason she did that, it was because it was some kind of protective sort of thing. So Wilson wrote about Lethbridge's account of that happening, and Bowie read it in Mysteries and collapsed it into Colin Wilson.
Going around doing
Cornwall.
Yes.
There you go. There you go.
Oh, that's a lovely story, really, isn't it? God, that sounds amazing. So look, this book is out. So does that mean that part 2 from 1997 has started, and you're
not yet. If I'm waiting a bit, because it'd be a bit harder to do, because I'm closer to more of the people still in my life, and I've had a couple of relationships during that time, and my 2 sons. But I'm thinking it's the kind of thing I'd like to do. So I'm trying to think. There's plenty to write about. So we'll see what happens.
And do you have any other projects happening this year?
I'm doing a 9-week course for the Cosmos Institute. It's online, and it's a course in existentialism, consciousness, and the occult. And that's basically over the work of Colin Wilson, because he developed this whole kind of philosophy of consciousness that is rooted in his early existential questions that he pursues in books like The Outsider and books like that. And then when he became interested in the occult and psychic phenomena, things of that sort, he saw that some insights he got from that can address some of these existential questions of the outsider, meaning and purpose and things of that sort. So it's every Sunday, and it's over the summer, so it's June to August. I forget the exact dates,
Fantastic.
But that's one thing I'll be doing, and I'll be doing some more of those. I'm doing quite a bit of, and if you happen to be in London, I don't know when you're.
Oh yes.
If you happen to be in London, I'm at Treadwell's Bookshop on May 28th. And that's on Store Street, and it's a wonderful occult alternative, bookshop, and I'll be talking about the book Touched by Your Presence with Christina Oakley Harrington, who's the owner.
Brilliant.
So that's a live event.
And do you still pick up a guitar occasionally and play?
Not really. What I did a couple of years ago, though, was I did quite a few gigs with a Blondie tribute band,
right,
called Bootleg Blondie. And I got to know them because Clem Burke actually a few years back did a whole kind of tour with them around. So it was like the Blondie drummer with, the Blondie tribute band. But no, they invited me to do a couple of tunes with them. So it's about 4 years ago I wound up doing just the stuff I played on, or the things I wrote.
Yes.
So they bring me up for a couple tunes and they do their whole show, and then they bring me up at the end for some. And then more recently, we did a couple memorial gigs for Clem to mark his passing.
Yeah, God, that must have felt very strange having that sort of connection with him.
It was fun, it was fun to do when you're 60 something. So I was surprised I could still play.
Yeah. Did you? Because you did get inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, didn't you? What was that like?
I actually wrote an article about it for The Guardian. I was surprised, but they did their homework. So no, it was remarkable. I mean, it's 20 years ago now. So I mean, it was kind of what's the word? Slightly soured. There's a whole story about. Well, when you're inducted, when the band is inducted, they usually perform.
Yes.
But Debbie didn't want to let any of myself or Frank Infante or Nigel, play. So there's a bit, I don't know if it was, there's a clip, I think it's up on YouTube. There's a clip of it where, everybody gets, 5 seconds to say something. And Frank, and there's a famous, where Frank says to, Debbie, "Oh, come on, Debbie, why don't you let us play?" And Debbie said, "Well, Frank, can't you see I brought my band here?" And Frank says something like, "Your band? I thought Blondie was getting inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame." So it was a bit, and I remember when that happened, it was like the place went quiet, and people didn't know whether is this a joke, and it was kind of serious. So yeah,
right.
But the other kind of non-event of that was the non-appearance of the Sex Pistols or Johnny Rotten. Because they were inducted, but they didn't show, and then they sent some letter. He wrote some letter, and they read it. So it was kind of like, I'm a celebrity, don't get me in here.
Yes.
Kind of thing.
It's a fantastically awkward moment, isn't it? Really. So yes, I do remember when I was very young. I suppose it was when that single came out. Sort of having to collect some Walker's packets of empty wrappers, and sending off and getting this Debbie Harry poster on my bedroom wall. I was only 13 or 14 at the time. But, when you're that age and you sort of, you're watching Top of the Pops religiously, it's always very exciting. So, so I had to eat lots of junk food to get a poster. That's what you did when you were young, really. There was no sort of, easy access to anything in life then, but that's it. But look, thank you ever so much. I mean, it's been, like I said, I've only just got the book, but it's been really interesting.
I hope it inspires you to read a bit of it. But
I will.
The music stuff is in the. Oh yeah, you go. The music stuff's pretty much in the center in there, and there's before and after. But
it's beautifully done. It's beautiful. Well, look, thank you ever so much for your time.
And the photos are by my very good friend Lisa Jane Persky.
Right. Yes, it's always exciting to. Yes, when we were young. But yes, it must have been quite a process to put this together and, relive it, so to speak. And, did you do much rewriting, or are you a writer who can sort of pretty much do it first take?
It's usually take sections out that don't work rather than rewrite a lot of things. Because you can just, sometimes you just, it's hard, it's just a feel. You can just, no, that doesn't work, so you pull it out. So,
yes.
And one of most writers say this. One of the things they like doing is the editing, because you walk away from it for a while and you go back and you say, "Oh God," it's like it's cleaning house,
Yes.
So it's and always keep the reader in mind, because he or she have many other things they can be doing rather than spending an hour reading your book in this hectic, ever-changing world. So, well, thank you, David, for inviting me on.
Yes, well, thank you as well, and I'll send you a link
pleasure.
if you want.
I have to go off and have some dinner now.
Yes, and are the neighbours still there? Have they moved?
I'm sorry?
the neighbours, have they moved?
Oh no, I wouldn't be able to be here. No, they're. Yes, I hope they've won the lottery and moved to Tahiti. You know,
Good.
it's that's what have them win $1 million and buy a house somewhere. So
Well, yes, absolutely. Well,
yeah.
interesting. When you mentioned that, we had the neighbours from hell, and we had to move because it was like they're never gonna. We just got to move, and it was horrible. It just made me very on edge all the time for that 5 years, and I just my nerves were shredded. So
I know exactly what you mean, and I don't know. I'm yes. So let's hope there's that was one hell I've passed through, and
good.
Others, not that one again.
No, I know. Anyway, look,
All right.
thank you for your time.
Take care. My pleasure.
Lovely,
All right,
bye-bye.
take care. Bye.
And that was me in conversation with Gary Lachman, talking about his life in music and also literature, books, and the occult. As I said, he's got a new book that's just been published, Touched by the Presence, available from all good bookshops and online. This has been the C86 Show. David Eastaugh. Have a great week. Stay safe.